Good evening. Welcome to our monthly agenda-setting meeting of the Mayor and Commission of the Unified Government of Athens-Clarke County. We appreciate you joining us and your interest. If you'd like an agenda, for those of you tonight, we have them on the table just to the right of the doors as you exit. And for those watching remotely, you can get an agenda at athens-clarkecounty.com. No final action will be taken on any items tonight. Final action will be taken on these items at our regular voting meeting on February the 6th. If you have a cell phone with you, would you please turn it off or to silent? If you brought handouts that you'd like us to have, if you hand them to Mr. Berryman, he'll be sure that we get them. Our rules of commission allow 3 minutes for comment from citizens, and there's a timing clock on Ms. Spratlin's desk that will be green when it starts and turns yellow at 2.5 minutes so that you know your time's about up. So please keep that in mind when you're talking to us. We have 2 opportunities for input tonight from citizens. The consent agenda, which are items 1 and 2, and then old and new business, which are items 3 through 14, and then an added 3 through 10. We've added number 14, and we've had one item removed. Which number was that, Jean? Item number 5 has been removed from tonight's agenda. We don't take public input on Planning Commission recommendations. There'll be a public hearing for those at our November meeting. Our February meeting. A few months off there. So we will. We also have a special call meeting tonight, and we will have a closed session at the end for an executive session at the end of our meeting, and that's for the purpose of pending legal actions and real estate transactions. So at this time, will you call the roll for us, Ms. Spratlin, for us?
Dickerson.
Here.
Sams. Blink.
Here.
Wright.
Present.
Bailey.
Present.
Neesmith.
Present.
Bale.
Here.
Harrod. Gertz.
Here.
Hamby.
Right,
You have a quorum.
Thank you. And so,
Madam Mayor, I make a motion for entering into executive session.
thank you. I need all the help I can get
I'll
tonight,
second that,
Kelly.
please.
Thank you. Have a motion second for executive session. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Have motion second, all in favor? Okay. We will now move to our agenda.
Vote for the adjourn?
I thought we did.
No.
Vote to adjourn.
Vote to
Vote to
adjourn.
adjourn, yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We will now move to our normal agenda, and anyone that's here with us tonight that would like to speak to an item on the consent agenda, those are items 1 through 2. Would you please come to the podium and give us your name and address and which item you're speaking to? Okay, looks like nobody wants to speak on the consent agenda. Would the commissioners like to take either of those items off? To go, Ms. Link?
Yeah, I'd like to take number 2 off just so we can discuss it a little bit.
Okay. That will go, I will put that at the top of our new business, so. Anybody else? Okay. At this time now is the time that a citizen could speak to us on our new business. And again, those are items 2 through 10 plus 14 minus 5. So would anybody like to speak to us? Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm Barbara Redmond. I live at 370 Parkway Drive. I'd like to speak to number 10 because I'm the owner of that house, and I'd like to speak in favor of it. I'm the one that initiated it, actually. It's an important part of Athens history. I value it, but right now there is no legal protection against it being torn down except for the fact that I own it. Nothing's going to happen to it while I own it, but I won't own it forever. And I'd like to see some legal protection for it in place for whenever I pass on.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate that. And in fact, for your information and the commissioners, because I found the item a bit confusing when I was trying to go through it, and Brad Griffin's done some explanation for me tonight that I think would be beneficial for all the commission to hear. And I think he's in the green room listening. I thought he was going to be back, but I was going to ask him if it's possible, if he has any thing that he can put on the screen for us tonight so that he can go through with everybody what he showed me this evening, because it it helped me understand it very much. So thank you, Barbara. Anybody else? Okay, we'll come behind the rail now and get on with business. So we start with item number 2 for discussion.
I just wanted to bring this up for discussion, just so the public's aware that this is another sidewalk project, exciting sidewalk project. This one's on Prince Avenue, between Pound and I guess near the Loop. And I actually walk this dirt path quite a lot, so I know there's a lot of folks out there who are going to be really excited to see this sidewalk project get completed.
Great.
And, with that, I'm happy to put it back on consent.
Okay, we'll put it back to consent. Anybody else want to discuss that one? We'll move on to item number 3. And this is our live stream pipe replacement. I think we had a presentation at our work session. Oh, I'm sorry, messed me up, skipping one. On-call water and wastewater facilities contracting. Any discussion here? Okay, y'all, okay, put that one on consent. Okay, now we'll get to the live stream replacement. And that's one that we had a pretty comprehensive presentation to us in our work session. Any concerns about that? Consent?
Yep.
Okay. We're going to be skipping number 5, and it'll come back at a later date. Number 6 is our Athens-Clarke Park Master Plan update. Would anybody like, again, we had a presentation. Anyone have any concerns or like to discuss it? Okay, y'all okay with consent on this one? And Boulevard Woods Park is number 7. Discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I just want to thank a couple of residents and folks outside the community too who've been very helpful in shepherding Boulevard Woods from its very early conception in 2008 or 2009 or so. Dan Lorenz and Alan Stovall, both in the Boulevard neighborhood, have really kind of been on this like bulldogs from the outset. They've shepherded lots of help to get it done. There's been a lot of community contributions that have gone into this. And then some large foundation dollars from the Riverview Foundation too, in 2 large segments, the most recent of which was $50,000 for this phase. So anytime there are those kind of foundation partners who want to invest in Athens-Clarke County, we're very grateful. In addition to their work, there's some trail construction activities that are mentioned in the agenda report. Some of that was done in conjunction with the Federal Conservation Corps, who had a lot of young folks in the community last year, clearing underbrush, getting rid of invasive species, and creating trails that people in the neighborhood are enjoying now. So looking forward to this moving ahead.
Great. Thank you for updating us on that, Kelly, because I don't think a lot of our citizens realize how much other citizens are contributing, and that's a wonderful addition to our community. So, y'all want to put that on consent, or you want to leave?
Consent.
Okay. And Firefly Trail project concept number 8, which is a T-Splost project, and this is our Winterville section. Any discussion on that? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say I'm excited that this thing is moving forward. I'm pleased that we've got, private sector investment in the way of Williams & Associates providing some design services, and that we'll see some work on this in the very, very near future. I am kind of curious if we have any indication from the city of Winterville whether or not we're going to have problems getting into those parcels, the 25 parcels or not, that form that first segment. Have we gotten any indication from them?
I believe Mayor Farrell sent out some notices that this was being discussed, and I think they're going to have an upcoming open house about it. And he told me the other day he's not received any comment at all.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
But
Well, we hope it goes fast and smooth.
I think there's 25. He's gotten some positive indication from several property owners. Hasn't heard from some, so we don't know quite yet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
But I will say that Mayor Farrell and the Winterville City Council have agreed to help us make those connections, and that'll be very, very worthwhile.
Yeah, and having Williams & Associates over there to help with that, that should help speed it along, too. I'm anxious to see some pavement down over there, so, as everybody else is. Okay. Are y'all happy for that to be on consent? Okay. Looks like we're not going to have much of a working meeting next time. And number 9 is the Firefly Trail project as well, and that's the concept. So any discussion on that?
Just a correction, I've already given staff about the approval. There's just a reference made that isn't referenced. So anyway, it'll get taken care of for the next round, but.
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
correct that,
Put
and
it on
as
consent.
usual, any additions after this meeting will be in gray shading, so you can go straight
Okay.
to it.
Does that have an, I should have checked, but does that have any reason that we can't put that on consent? Does it have ordinances or anything, Bill?
No,
Okay. Consent then? Yes, sir.
I had just a brief question about the termini both of this sub-project and then the one that we just looked at in Winterville. If there is some segment of time, just in terms of assembling parcels or doing engineering or managing other components of these, will there be some kind of trailhead at the termini of these two segments toward what will ultimately be the inner sub-project? Has there been some thought given to that, or is the expectation that the inner component will go smoothly enough that we really don't need to think about that as a set of trailheads as such, like we think about the
Sure.
East Broad trailhead for the main segment?
Well, of course, we haven't done the design, but that's certainly something that we need to look at, is having a place. I think that it's gonna run proximate to the depot. And, you know, in Winterville, that's sort of a gathering point for parking. But we can certainly look at that.
Okay,
All right.
thanks.
Y'all want to keep that on?
Let me point out
Yes.
one thing. Bill, I think the resolution itself needs to be read by you at the voting meeting, is that correct?
No.
No?
It's
Okay.
not an ordinance, so it doesn't.
Okay. Okay, that's why I want to be sure of. So consent, everybody? Okay.
Moving right along.
And then item number 10,
You won't have to wear your shirt very long, Madam Mayor.
that's a good thing. Tonight, I should have maybe worn it. But I want to honor the spirit as well as the promise, so, yeah.
Left the shortest meeting ever.
Yeah, I think it is going to be. Item number 10 is local historic landmark designation. Did you want to discuss this, or, Brad, will you be able to discuss that with us? Would you rather, because we don't have to take action? Well, that's the last thing, so we can go right into your,
We can go right in. I'll just.
yeah, okay. Well, I'm just going to ask Brad if he'll come up here for our planning items and look at item number 10 with us first, because I think it'll help everybody, because it helped me a lot when we talked a few minutes.
And I do not have a presentation prepared to put on the screen, but I can tell you a couple, landmark designations you don't do a lot of. If you've not had a chance to read the designation report that was prepared by the owner of the unit, I would encourage you to read. It's an interesting property. It goes back in almost 1830s, we think. Property was sold 2 or 3 times. In the 80s, it was sold to Snapfinger LLC with a condition on it that the house had to be protected, but it only ran for 25 years. So that's why we're here. The owner wants to protect it. I think there may be some confusion with if this is designated as a local landmark, what exactly is impacted and what is not on the overall property, because property itself includes a number of condos on both the left and the right-hand side. If you look at page 4 of the designation report that the applicant submitted, there's an aerial that shows the house, and it's got a red box drawn around it. Only the property within the box, if this is to be identified as a landmark property, is subject to any type of review from the Preservation Commission. So the condos on either side, while on the same parcel of land, they are not part of the designation and subsequently not part of any review. If they were to be torn down, they could be administratively. I think part of the concern that the owner of this property has, even beyond just the possible destruction of the resource in the house, is the view shed, the context of how that house sits on the property. If the other condos were removed and the landmark does not come all the way out to Pope Street, something new could be built across the front of it, putting the house basically in the backyard of some condos. That's what she's trying to protect. Fairly common in local landmark designations to go all the way out to the street. So that is, I think the biggest concern, though, that some of the owners, there are actually 4 owners within this development. This individual and then 3 others. One individual owns the majority of the units. All of them have been notified throughout this process. And I think there may be some miscommunication or some concern with them that their ability to make changes or modifications to their individual units may be hampered, and that's not the case.
And that was my concern when I expressed it. And if any of these other owners are listening or have somebody that knows them that's listening, I would encourage them to get in touch with your office so that they can get a better explanation for
Would
it.
be happy to talk to any, I know two of the three, I don't know
Yeah.
the third gentleman that lives in Dublin,
Yeah,
but
right.
would be happy to talk to any of them.
Well, great. Anybody else have, can I ask one quick thing, Andy, first? And then I'm going to go sit down so we can get into our planning items when we finish this. But my understanding is with the landmark designation, that really does not give protection, but only recognition. Is that
No,
correct?
this gives the same level of protection
Okay.
that it's really even within the limits
that
of the property.
box,
It's even
yeah.
a little more stringent in some cases, I think, than a historic district is.
Is that clear, true for all the landmark properties?
Yes.
Well, great. I had misunderstood that, so. Andy?
Thank you. So I understand what you're saying, Brad, and certainly makes sense to have that entire piece that's within the red lines included for the very reason that you mentioned about not having something else built right in front of this house and covering it up. The question I have, though, is that on this parcel, there is a communal parking lot. So what happens, since traffic moves back and forth over that, presumably at some point it needs to be resurfaced, at some point they might want to restripe it, at some point they might want to reconfigure it. How does that play in, given that it's the bit within the red box within the larger parcels?
I'm glad you asked me that question because I should have mentioned it. Restriping, resurfacing would just be a staff permit, not even a staff level COA. If they wanted to come in and possibly reconfigure some of it, because the parking was part of the original landmark designation, it would be a staff level COA that they would get through us. You know, certainly an application to build a new building in the box would go to the HPC and would probably be a very difficult approval.
Okay.
But the general maintenance and even modification of that parking lot should all be at staff level.
Okay.
Well, when I understood the explanation that only what was in this, and I don't have it in color, but what's in this box is what's affected, made total sense to me, so. Anybody else have any questions on that one? Melissa?
Yeah, I just want to thank the property owner for taking the initiative. We don't have too many properties in Athens-Clarke County from this era, so it's really important to see this protected.
Yes. Blaine, you want to talk to us about it?
Yes, there is an additional agenda item that's forthcoming. We didn't get it out today. It's got an emergency nature to it. It's a storm culvert repair and replacement over on Riverview Road. It came to our attention back in November that there was some erosion happening. We did some excavation to see what was going on down there and saw that it had indeed failed. And throughout December, we did a staff created construction plans and requested quotes from local contractors who could mobilize quickly. And we got those quotes, and this is for $500,000. And so you'll be asked to award a construction contract to E.R. Snell, who was the most responsive bidder, and for that amount, which would come from our stormwater utility fee, and then they could begin work as early as the first week of February. So
So that'll be an item on
something
our,
that we need, yes, if you
voting
agree,
meeting.
Madam Mayor.
well, it's already approved, so. So, anybody else before? Yes,
Can
ma'am.
item number 10 go on consent?
No,
Okay.
it's a separate,
Okay.
it requires a separate public hearing, just
Okay.
like
Yeah.
a zoning item does.
Okay.
Otherwise it could, but
Okay.
You really want that meeting to be fast,
I
don't
do.
you?
I'm not going to be able to stay in that jersey here, but we'll
Jim.
get through it.
Just a real quick question about number 14. Is that money coming from the same monies that would come from the pipe replacement, or is that,
Yes.
I mean, so we would see a reduction in that?
And that's why we had the caveat in that particular agenda
Right.
item that said, as conditions change, we may have to move projects around.
Okay.
And again, just want to, that one's a little more expensive because we're using a contractor, because they have certain capabilities that our staff doesn't have, which I can explain a bit more at a future time, specifically to Jack and Bore. As you've seen in the attachment to the other agenda item, staff can do, you know, the cost of the work for the cost of materials, which is a much, you know, less expensive alternative, but these are expensive projects.
So are we to understand then that item 4 on that list of live stream culvert system report would fall off?
I can respond to that. Let me get staff just to reorder it based on what we know now, and we can substitute that or give you that information.
Okay.
Okay. Brad, get back so you can show us some pretty pictures.
Okay.
I overlooked 14 because we had it.
Oh,
Ready when you are, Brad, for item number 11, and this is,
I have made a mistake here. I'm sorry.
it's all right.
I was talking to you earlier and forgot to pick myself up.
Oh. Well, while you're doing that, this item 11 is a request from Jeff Carter Engineering Consultants for Chestnut Grove Baptist Church. And this is basically driveway, and it's on Epps Parkway in 1645 Timothy Road. And this is in Mike's district, and he's not here to talk about it, so.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. You did the first part for me. This is an expansion of an existing special use boundary to include a parcel on Timothy Road. There is a need to amend our future development map from existing community institutional and traditional neighborhood to a single family to make it all as one. The underlying single-family zoning would stay in place with this special use, and as with all, it would include a binding plan and report. Subject property here, the little triangle right there is the piece that's being added, and to be pulled into the special use for purpose of an additional driveway onto Timothy Road. You see that's the top end again there, and the driveway would be a right out and right in only driveway, and it would be directly across from the Kirkwood curb cut on Timothy Road. And it's interesting how some of these things work out from a timing standpoint. We were just talking about a local landmark designation. Chestnut Grove School that you see here in red is a local landmark. The red box is the same basically as the red box was for the property on Pope Street, although it is within a much larger overall parcel, kind of like we were talking on Pope. And with this, the driveway moving through the corner of that landmark, what we are asking, just for preservation of the integrity of the landmark designation, just move the driveway about 3 feet to get it out of the box. But as long as it's out of the box, even though it is on the same property, it does not require any review by HPC. So same here, that is one of the conditions, but that's really the extent of this request, is to include that piece of property. They own it already, but in order to put a driveway out to Timothy, it requires an amendment to pull in the property and to modify the binding plan. Here's the location where it would come out, and really the only clearing that's going to be required and utilized is just enough to get the driveway through, and you've got some clearing limits on your plan. And this is where it would come out on Timothy across from Kirkwood that you see there on the left. And then that's on the left, existing future development classifications, on the right, changing it all to single family. Recommendation for future development from the Planning Commission is to approve, and for the special use modification, approve with the 4 conditions you see listed on the screen.
Any questions, commissioners? Yes, Ms. Sharon?
I'm just trying to remember, when we had the request from the bank on the other corner, it seems like there was a question about having a driveway in a decel lane or in an approach. Like, is that not the same? I mean, wasn't there something about not having a right-in, you couldn't have a driveway off of Epps Bridge into that because you were coming into a curve to turn or something? I'm just kind of curious if there's not a similar conflict, and why?
No, I don't. I think on the other side, you had a decel lane, people moving over at the same point where cars were turning right onto the road.
And
So you
this,
had
you're
a-
just approaching into an existing lane?
The southbound vehicles on Epps Bridge, it would be turning right onto Timothy, would be within a very short distance in a conflict with cars that were crossing Timothy to the west, trying to get over into the decel lane to get up into the bank. That was the conflict that does not exist here.
Okay, thanks.
But Andy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a similar kind of question. So I understand it's going to be ride in, ride out only. But you know what often happens on those kinds of things? People still want to turn left out of there, and that is very close to that intersection, and Timothy Road is a very busy road. Is there any thought about designing that in such a way so that that would be physically impossible to do?
I always hesitate to say impossible, but that's the nature of condition 3, that the driveway be put in conformance with TPW standards, which would include the concrete island triangle in the center where
Okay.
it flares in both directions. That still doesn't necessarily mean that somebody that's bound and determined they're going to try to turn left. But it's designed to the maximum extent possible, other than putting something in the center of the road, which
Well, I
would
guess
then-
that's where my question, is there any
If you
thought
did
about
that, it
putting
would-
those plastic, what do you call them, but those plastic things?
I think if you did that, you would then also prohibit left turn movement, or, left turn movements coming out of Kirkwood onto, you would prohibit their ability to turn left, which I think they can now, coming out of the neighborhood. But that's why it's restricted to design as a right-in, right-out only, to strongly discourage the left turn movement.
Anybody else have any questions for Brad?
I was just going to say something. The island you're talking about to prevent, that makes it perfect for people to park a car to sell there, like they do along Atlanta Highway. We need to discourage people from doing that. It's just an opportunity to throw that out there. Thank you.
Yes,
Has
sir.
nothing really to do with this property.
Anybody else? Okay. We'll move on to item number 12, which
Okay.
is request from Daniel Marks and Calvin Fleming
Okay.
for another rezoning.
It's at 1945, 1951 Commerce Road, currently zoned commercial general, but in an employment future development district. The applicant is requesting to rezone property to an EI zoning classification, which is it's compatible with the comprehensive plans future development map. For one parcel, it's a straight rezoning. Therefore, it does not carry any binding plans or voluntary conditions, but we have recommended conditions as part of our recommendation to approve through the Planning Commission. Essentially, what this rezoning would do, it restricts some of the retail opportunities, but it opens up some additional employment-type opportunities, such as manufacturing, warehousing, things that currently are not permitted in CG, but are permitted in the employment industrial zones. Employment industrial typically does not carry as many of the same architectural restrictions on a corridor like this, which is what's driving the conditions from the Planning Commission with regard to architectural materials and those types of things. You see the property there on the left and the proposed change, and this looks like it's really kind of a spot dropping in, but you'll see with the future development map, the purple is all, that is intended long-term to be this type of employment zoning. The CG largely on Commerce Road reflects existing conditions prior to 2000 when the original future development map, this one, was adopted. Here's, again, the property in question, an aerial view of it. And the recommendation from the Planning Commission was to approve with two conditions: that no metal or plain concrete exterior materials shall be visible from the street. This would be for any new expansion, development. It does not require, upon adoption of a zoning change, that they would have to retrofit materials, but any future improvements would require this, as well as there is some more opportunity for outdoor storage within the employment zones, but we're asking that if that is utilized, that screening of that storage from the right-of-way be required.
Mr. Brady, I think this is your district, isn't it? Do you have anything you'd like to say about this? I'm sorry, you may not can hear me. Isn't this your district?
Yep.
Yes, ma'am, it is. And I really haven't had a chance to study this, I'm sorry. So I'm going to study it in detail and ask any questions I need of staff before our next meeting.
Anybody else?
Okay.
Okay, we're going to move on to item number 13. This may be a
I
record length
have
meeting. too.
one text amendment for you, that this is a staff-generated amendment. We're the ones that are bringing this to you, so if you have concern with its origin or with what it says, it is, just blame us for it. But I mean, it's a pretty restrictive amendment in terms of, it's not going to open up a lot of opportunity for us, but what this does is we have often found ourselves in situations when we're reviewing subdivision plats, in terms of people really just not creating new lots per se, but wanting to modify property lines, property boundaries. If you've got a neighbor and y'all agree that you want to move a property line to get a driveway on or something, if the existing properties are not currently conforming to the zoning classifications, lot size, or any dimensional requirements, even though you're making one of them better, I don't have any administrative authority to allow that to occur, because I'm still technically, I've got a non-conforming lot that I'm making it even smaller potentially. And so where we see this most of the time, honestly, are existing parcels that predate 2000 that are in the ag zone, that are not 10 acres in size, that simply want to reconfigure their property boundaries with an adjacent property. But just for example, if I've got two neighbors side by side in the ag zone, one of them has an acre and a half and one of them has 6 acres, and the person with 6 acres wants to sell the person with an acre and a half 2 of his acres. I can't do that. But even though I'm taking the acre and a half lot and making it much larger, the 6-acre lot is becoming smaller. It's already non-conforming. I have no authority to do that. This amendment would give us that ability to move those things around. It does, we have placed conditions in there. First and foremost, what it cannot do is it cannot create any more lots than it currently exists within the subdivision. So it's not going to address some of the concerns that have been raised earlier, people wanting to create a new lot on their property. It cannot make any of the lots more non-conforming than the most non-conforming lot to start with. So in the case of the 6 acres and the acre and a half can't give the 6 half an acre and go to 1. I mean, no lots could be created that were smaller than the smallest, and I can't create any new nonconformities. So if the lot was currently conforming to lot width requirements of 200 feet in the AR zone, so they're a legal lot from that standpoint, I cannot make that lot 150 feet. If they're already non-conforming, it gives me some latitude to work with property owners, but it does not give me the ability to create any new lots or the other things I've got listed. It's not going to be used a lot, but we do have some examples out there already, the properties, family property that they're trying to reconfigure in the AR zone, the state properties. I can't help them right now because they're all less than 10 acres in size. And this would give me that ability.
But what do they have to do now? Do they have to come to us to?
They'd have to rezone the property.
Totally rezone.
So Brad, in a situation where, let's say, there's a guy that owns 20 acres and some of that land goes behind 2 houses in an AR zone. Goes behind 2 houses that are a couple of acres each. That person is not now allowed to sell that property to them unless it makes both of their houses, most of their lots, 10 acres or larger, right?
No, in that particular case, because you're starting with 20 on the one lot, which is conforming, that he could sell to the 2 adjacent property owners as long as he never goes below 10 himself.
Okay.
If he was starting with 9 and you had 2 adjacent property owners that were an acre and he wanted to give them both an additional acre immediately behind, I can't do that right now. I could under this scenario.
Under this, you could.
Because we're not creating any lots that are smaller than the 2 1-acre lots were to start with, and I'm not creating a non-conforming lot out of one that wasn't already that way. It's not going to be something that we use a lot, but they're the ones that are, the family comes in and they're kind of scratching their head. They don't, they've owned this property for 60 years, and because of a zoning change, they can't even move a line around when they're already non-conforming. We got more work to do long-term on some of the other issues with regard to the ability to create a new lot out of your lot, for example, in AR when you're substandard. But that's a different ballgame than this, and we're still looking at that.
Does this have implications for some of our in-town neighborhoods? Because I know we have lots of non-conforming lots in our much older in-town neighborhoods.
I've used AR as an example, but this is an amendment into the general regulations that would apply to any zoning district, not just AR.
Anybody else have any questions?
Okay,
I
thank you
think
very
this-
much.
I think this finishes us for tonight. We have an executive session, so we need to ask our visitors to excuse us. Okay?
Yes, I did.
Barbara,